So, hi everyone, my name is Kalden Swart, or just Kal as I prefer because everyone gets it wrong. And I am the engineering lead here at Specno. Please don't ask me what that means, I don't actually know. Yeah, so today I'm going to be talking about dev to founder, more specifically the challenges to expect when you are developing your own product. Let me be clear, there's sort of two parts to this. One of the main reasons I wanted to talk about this is not necessarily for people who actually want to transition to a founder, but more specifically because when I was still in the early stages of my career, this was the kind of information that I was always quite excited to learn about and to try and find out. I found that throughout my career as a developer, there was a lot of decisions that always got made up in the business realm that didn't always make sense. I found it very helpful to have a better understanding into sort of the process that goes into it. And then second to that, just in case anyone actually does have any desire to become a founder, this might give you some kind of value at the very least. So I think before I move on, I actually just want to ask a couple questions first, just to get a rough idea. So I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys here are devs, but if I could just get some hands up for everyone that is a dev. All right, decent to know. I see there's a couple of hands that aren't up. Out of curiosity, how many people here work in the product space? Okay, got a couple over here. And of the devs, how many people have thought about starting your own product or had an idea for some kind of a product? A lot more than I was expecting, that's great. And how many of you have actually attempted to start a product? Brilliant, all right. That gives me hope. Let's move on. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is solve for them, not for you. I want to try and use a bit of like a case study throughout this, just like a mock product that can maybe help translate some of the value that I'm hoping to deliver. A problem that I have personally felt as a developer is specifically surrounding passwords and API secrets. When you're working between so many projects, it becomes quite difficult to keep track of all of them, right? So that's a problem that I personally face. So I want to use that as a sort of a case study. So me personally, the problem that I might face may specifically be around how to manage these, but it's going to dive a little bit deeper into integration. I want an easy way to have passwords and API keys easily integrated into the product flows that I'm working on, the pipelines for deployments, etc., etc. If I were to now take this and think, okay, how can I actually build a business around this? The first thing I'm going to do is ask, okay, what is not necessarily my problem, but what kind of problem would other people potentially have that's similar? So the first thing I would do is I would go out and talk to some businesses, get some ideas about the kind of problems that they have regarding a very similar situation. And most of them may potentially come back and say that, yeah, sure, they have a problem with managing their API keys and secrets, but their problem specifically revolves around the management of access. Being able to share it between the teams and manage who can access what secrets and who can't. So already the problem you can see is starting to transition away from what might potentially be just my problem. Because if I am just focusing on my problem, I'm going to be the only customer, and I'm pretty sure I'm not going to pay myself. So yeah, start to transition the problem from yours to theirs. Identify who else potentially experiences your problem or a similar problem, and start to get an understanding of how you can provide 20% value, or 20% of the effort to get 80% of the value out. That's probably the best way to maximize your value. If you can go to the next slide, please. Great, what's the next thing? This is something that I find most developers that I have spoken to that have attempted to start their own product struggle with. They all try and engineer this perfect monstrosity, and most of them end up spending so much time building this that it never actually crosses the finish line. It never gets built. They just keep wanting to add and add and add onto it. So this is going to be a hard one for some devs to hear, but start unscalable. Right? Start with just a simple prototype, just some designs that you can click through, even if they look horrible, like they're from 1998, and just get them in front of potential customers. Just get some feelings, get some feedback. Honestly, I promise it's the best way to start. The next thing you can potentially look at doing is moving on to a proof of concept. Validate that people may actually be willing to pay for this. Try and get 1 or 2 paying customers with some very minimal features. Get an understanding of where the actual real value lies. From that point, you can move on to your minimum viable product. actually starting to build something that could potentially scale, maybe you look at rebuilding. Aiming to rebuild is honestly not a bad thing to do. Sure, you want to start with something that you can scale, that's extensible, but I promise you, rebuilding, when you actually know how to provide value to customers and actually get some revenue back, it's going to be the best place to start. Again, this is highly dependent on how architectural complicated your idea is. Rapid iteration and simplicity over complexity. That's my number one motto. And then iteration and growth from there on. If we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So, this is really my last slide. I wanted to just keep this somewhat short and quick. I want to talk specifically about people over tech. When it comes to actually trying to scale and grow, the next sort of thing that you should be focusing on is not necessarily the tech, right? 50% of the work is distribution. Sure, you can figure out how to build it, but how are you going to sell it? How are you going to get people using it? That's really where majority of the work lies. And that's why I say start unscalable. Figure out where you can put 20% of your value as a developer in developing the product to provide 80% of the value to a customer. Aim to sell, forget everything else, and metrics, and more metrics. That's another one that I like to focus on. This is a big one that not just devs specifically struggle with. It's something that almost every founder I have ever worked with in my entire career has struggled with, is they don't fully value the data that metrics can provide. Once you've got your first 10 customers and you're trying to move on to your next 100 customers, and you get into the point where you're running out of the ability to actually individually talk with each one of your customers, the only other thing you can do is start to implement, actual programmatic metrics and try and get a deeper understanding into how people are using the product. At that point, you can actually guide your development and guide your feature roadmaps a lot more specifically and clearly, and figure out how you can provide the most value, what features you should be prioritizing, which is really going to lay the foundation to the next 1,000 customers and possibly 10,000. If you're fortunate enough to get to the point of 10,000, well, you can forget everything that I've just said because you're already much further ahead, and I can't help you from that point on. But yeah, thank you so much. That's, like I said, it'll be short and sweet. I really appreciate the time. Thank you.
What kind of products did you build as a founder?
So, ironically, the idea of the passwords and API key management was actually something that I was legitimately going down the road for. I got quite far into the development roadmap. I made all the common mistakes. I didn't listen to anything that I just said. And ironically, the exact idea that I had, I got beaten to the market by a new startup that recently came in called Physical. And they actually just got funded by Y Combinator for over $500,000. Yeah. I also sold sunglasses online. different.
So how do you deal with that competition? Like every time I build something, I always see someone that has already built it and I end up just working on something else.
So that's a common question that a lot of founders end up having, regardless of their background. What it really comes down to is, at least in my personal opinion, is really two factors. Is one, can you identify a gap in the market where they're not providing value, something that may be niche but maybe be able to return a lot of value and potentially focus on that, or can you do it faster and better? Sometimes this is really what it comes down to. Any other questions? Yes, in the back.
If you could recommend any sort of Kickstarter sort of process to kick yourself off and get going, what would you recommend someone to try and bootstrap something together?
To try and bootstrap something? That's tough. I mean, it really comes down to the idea. But the first thing I would say is don't even build anything. Just go out and find some potential customers and talk to them. Start building that network, because once you do have a product, they're going to be the people you want using it. If you really want to start to build something that's quick and easy, there's plenty of good low-code and no-code options. But that's again why I say it depends on how complicated, at least architecturally complicated your idea is.
Tell LinkedIn you're going to build it, then you have to.
Yeah, great advice. You had a question? Yes.
Yes. So I'm wondering if you have any advice for people like me. I feel like I'm a decent enough engineer, and I have the odd idea here or there. I can build it, but eventually I need design which I have absolutely zero skills in, and I need kind of legal and T's and C's and whatever, and that's basically where my progress crawls to nothing every time.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
what do you do with these services at the very early stage where you don't have a budget really?
The best thing I can recommend is really just it's a simple answer, simpler than you might expect. But yeah, get out a network and find potentially a co-founder to work alongside. There's so much potential value in having co-founders and combining strengths and weaknesses. No one's perfect at everything. There's someone out there who's really good at the things you're bad at. That's not a bad thing, that's a really great thing. Because if you can combine your value, you just, 1 + 1 = 3.
Awesome, thank you.
Yes.
I'm a junior tech, so I see that I'm trying to increase my portfolio, but I feel like it's like what you said in your presentation, that at times I feel like I want to perfect the parts or whatever I'm working on, that I tend to push places and things. In order to improve my portfolio, what advice would you give?
It depends. I guess this is a portfolio for getting hired. As if you're an engineer, I would recommend go out and find some nice designs or some nice, even an existing system, right? And replicate it. I know, like when I was starting out, the biggest thing that I struggled with was getting a nice looking system, because I thought, if I apply with a system that looks like it's Windows XP, no one's going to take me seriously. But it's very easy enough to just copy another system. Go and rebuild Twitter, go and rebuild YouTube. It doesn't have to actually function the same. Maybe that's not your priority. Maybe you're just a front-end dev. You just want to show how you can, get 100% design accuracy in your development. Or if you are a back-end dev, obviously an API would probably be great. But yeah, I would probably recommend trying to just replicate something, and it'd also be a great opportunity to actually identify how certain things can be challenging to build and challenge you to figure out how to overcome it. Any more questions? Great. Thank you, everyone.